I'm finding that the lines are blurring between peacetime and wartime now because things change so much.
That's Kat Cole, CEO of AG1.
So I have found over the years, my leadership has evolved to have a more always-on intensity that would be reflective of what used to be called wartime CEO, but is an always-on intensity.
I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. I sat down with Kat Cole to discuss how staying obsessively close to the customer can unlock hidden growth potential, how to balance wartime intensity with long-term cultural sustainability, and why asking better questions unlocks faster, more relevant innovation.
The reality is you kind of know the 10 things you could and should be doing, but other things are taking precedent. So if you just give yourself the discipline and the expectation to do one of those things each week, I get that year's worth of weeks things done that maybe I would have never done or I would have not done as. So it makes me an absolute beast in leadership and in business.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. All right, Kat, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you here because last November you were our mystery speaker at the Game Changers Summit and absolutely crushed it. So just
Thank you.
Looking forward to having you on the podcast. You are in many ways like the poster child for possibility. And for those that aren't familiar with you, I'd love to always know, like, why is someone the way they are? A lot of times it's like their childhood or their upbringing. Could you speak to some of that?
Yeah, I think it's no different for me. You know, when I reflect at what has driven some of the decisions I've made, or where people would say, wow, that was an exceptional moment or choice. How did you know to do that? Or why did you do that? Upon reflection, it does have a lot to do with my childhood. So I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, a child of a single parent alcoholic father. And the dynamic that led to being a child of a single parent before we left my dad was I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and both sides of my family were unbelievably poor. I mean, I always joke it's like Jerry Springer, and for anyone who's too young to know who that is, it's like the Kardashians, but poor. Like drama, drugs, homelessness. I think most of my, 15, 16 cousins have passed away from suicide, murder, overdose. Like, it is the poster of just not good in a childhood. However, my dad at the time had a fancy job. He was the only person that I am aware of in my mom's side of my family and my dad's that had a what would be considered knowledge job, white collar job. He was an executive at an auto imports company. So, and we had a house and we had a car. I even had like a little playhouse out back. So we looked rich by comparison. Now we were middle class, but we looked very wealthy by comparison. So everyone would tell my mom, her sisters, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, they would tell my mom, you're so lucky, because we all have to deal with addiction. We all have to deal with alcoholism. I was in multiple car incidents with my dad by the time I was 9 years old. Like, the alcoholism was rampant. And my mom was just so convinced she should just be grateful because she had things other people didn't have. She had the negative, but she had more positive than others had. And very quickly she moved from, I should be grateful because this could be so much worse. Like I could have to deal with the negative and not have a house and not have a car. And my mom was what was called a secretary at the time. So she did work, but it was very entry level, hourly administrative work. And we had no other resources, but we didn't need it because we had my dad. And eventually there was just another day of the same thing where she moved from things could be worse, so I should be grateful, to things could be worse, but that doesn't mean I don't have the right, and in this case, the responsibility to try to make it better. And so with no help, no playbook, no precedent in my family of divorce, she came to me at the age of 9 and said, we're leaving. And as I've reflected and as my mom will retell the story, I didn't cry and I didn't get upset. I had some version of a reaction that was like, what took you so long? Or finally, because I was old enough to know it was bad. My 2 younger sisters weren't quite as aware, but I knew it was bad. I knew it wasn't much different than others in the family, but I still knew it wasn't good. And so when she decided to leave, which we did, with no help, no financial resources, I was actually relieved. And we left. She fed us on a food budget of $10 a week for 3 years. And I just remember the details of that, right? The scrappiness, the resourcefulness, but also her fairly positive attitude, even though we were kind of starting over with, and oh, by the way, my dad did not have the ability or desire to pay child support. So there was no support. And so I grew up in that period of like 9 to 15, having exited that bad vibe to now a more scrappy, like things are happier and they feel safer, but we have to work a lot harder. And I have more responsibility and I need to watch the girls. And I am partly the father figure and my mom working all the time, leaving me with more responsibility. And so you can imagine for most of us, and many people hear that story and it's not too different than a lot of other folks, what that created in me, which was a respect for work, because it was like this exit from the past. If I can work, any work, I'd be a Hooters girl, which I was. Work in a mall, which I did, clean gym equipment, which I did, all at the same time, from the one time I was like 15 to 18. It was honorable. It was all like an exit and a path. So an affinity for work and nobility in work. And in those early days, of course, that was just hourly labor, a respect for people who made tough decisions. And if you know my mom, you would see that I also developed this calm and positivity, even amongst negative situations, that allowed me to kind of keep going when things were hard, whatever hard would mean in the future.
And at 17, like you said, you're a Hooters hostess, but then by 26, you're a VP opening the restaurants worldwide. I guess was there a certain decision or a mindset shift that you think contributed to that trajectory?
There were a few things. One, you can't remove the fact that that company that I was with, which was Hooters Restaurants, was growing. There's a lot more opportunity for people in a company when there's growth. And that was a kind of the heyday of that brand where they were opening new restaurants, sometimes multiple a month. So there's a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity. You need more layers, more management, more support. And so I benefited from that. You can't remove that from the equation. I wasn't just exceptional in a vacuum. The next was because I had that mindset that I described, that every job is a noble job. When I worked in the restaurant as an hourly employee, I ended up working every job in the restaurant: cook, hostess, bartender. One, because I wanted to make more money, and more shifts, more jobs means more access to income. But I was also curious to see, like, can I figure this out? Like, can I be a cook? And I'm a helper. I've always wanted to be helpful. So when the bartender was like, I got to go home, can you cover my shift? Or the cook was like, hey, I need to leave early. Can you come back here and work the fryers? I'm like, of course. I have the ability and the desire, and hey, I get paid for it. It's great. The outcome of that is that when we started opening more restaurants around the world, the company needed people who knew all the jobs to go travel and train in those new restaurants. So here I am, unknowingly qualified for that. It wasn't my plan, but it happened. And so that's one big ingredient to this recipe of the career advancement that you described, from like hostess to executive in a company at the time that I became vice president was doing $800 million in revenue. The second was, I had a lot of great leaders who gave me a chance. There were people who saw something in me. I also think there's something to the fact that it was Hooters and there weren't Wharton MBAs beating down the door to take management jobs. So where did they look? Inside. So again, I benefited from that, but I was ready. And then I was willing to say yes. When I was asked to go open a franchise in Australia when I was 19 years old, I'd never been on a plane. I did not have a passport. I'd never been a part of an opening restaurant training team in my life, but I still said yes. Then I bought my first ever plane ticket, flew to Miami, got my passport in 48 hours, back when you could do that and get it expedited, and then left and did the opening, and that opened more doors. They were like, oh, okay, you've done that opening. Now can you go to Central America, South America? And I just kept saying yes, even though I was in college and the plan was to just have all this restaurant work to pay for school, and then I would become an attorney. Actually, that was my dream. I was going to go get an engineering degree and then go to law school. That was the plan. But Hooters kept giving me opportunities, and it kept feeling right, and I kept being good enough at it for them to ask me to continue. And that then led, when I was 20, to the opportunity to take my first ever corporate job. So all that time, that 17 to 20, it was just hourly work. You know, can you be a waitress? Can you be a shift leader? Can you travel and go open? In that case, I was paid a daily fee. But it was all no contract, no promises, no career, just normal, like what people do when they're in college, just a bit maybe unique, being international at Hooters. When I was 20, I got a phone call asking me to interview for a corporate job, which would pay me actually a lot less than my ability to pick up shifts, $21,000 to be specific, of pre-tax income. And I was so excited because I was a little nervous about being broke, because it felt like being broke. Because when you're a waitress, you can just pick up a shift. Like, money is actually quite easy to come by if you're willing to work. But when you're on a fixed salary for 50, 60 hours a week, it's a whole shift in maturity and financial responsibility, but it also felt like advancement. And so I said yes. And that's how I got from Jacksonville to Atlanta. So that was another choice, right? I chose advancement and learning and what felt like professional growth over income. And then the company was growing, and every year within the corporate office, I took on more and more and more responsibility, which led to, when I was 26, being vice president of the company.
And then I believe it was in 2011, the shift to Cinnabon. You were the president of Cinnabon, the move to Focus Brands. What contributed to that transition from Hooters to Focus Brands?
There were a few things. Over the years, I was with Hooters in total for 14 and a half years. And you can imagine somewhere in that corporate professional era, I had many opportunities to leave. I was recruited. There were other cool restaurant chains. There were other hospitality companies recruiting me. I was very active in the industry, in the restaurant association, both at the state and federal levels. And so I had the network, and I had the reputation, and I had the invitations to go work somewhere else. But each time, up until the Cinnabon opportunity came around, it just wasn't interesting enough for me to leave. Like, Hooters was fully vertically integrated. We had an airline, Hooters Air. It was a thing. People should look it up. So weird. It was like a terrible business idea, but quite a fascinating opportunity to be involved. We owned our own supply chain. We owned our own merchandising company. We had our own golf tour, the NGA golf tour that birthed John Daly. You're welcome, everyone. And we had the Hooters Hula Bowl. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the universe, this orange universe that we had. And so when other companies, whether it was a donut company, a coffee company, a hotel company, it was kind of boring by comparison. And even if those companies were larger, which often they were, and they were offering more money, and I would at least then be going to a company where people didn't kind of squint their eyes when you told them where you worked. Because, you say you work for Hooters, some people are like, that's so cool. And other people are like, they kind of look down on you. And so I could have traded off that skepticism, more money, less controversy, but way less growth and learning. And learning is my currency. It has always been my currency. I couldn't have articulated it early on like that, but I can now. And so I didn't go. None of those opportunities were interesting enough. And I learned to ask myself two questions to determine, is it time to change, at least from a career perspective. One is my job done here? Do I feel my work is done? However I define that. Yeah. And the second is, if I'm honest, can someone else do a better job at what is needed going forward than me? And up to the point that I left to go to Cinnabon, Focus Brands, and Roar Capital, the answer to one or both of those questions was no. My work is not done here, and someone else can't do a better job for what is needed now. But eventually, the answer was yes to both. And so it was a culmination of the interestingness of the opportunity to join a multi-brand franchise portfolio and be a president for a first time of a global business that had incredible nostalgia and awareness. I grew up working in malls when I was 15, so Cinnabon and Auntie Anne's were like, I loved them. And I had not yet found my religion around health, if you will. But at the same time, even if that opportunity had come, but I felt my job wasn't done or that someone else couldn't do a better job at Hooters at the time, I would have said no to that. But those things converged. My work was done. And what was needed next was going to be work for someone else at Hooters. And this opportunity was just an alignment of multi-brand, which was important to me, a private equity firm that I respected. We had been privately owned at Hooters, but yet I was a part of the transaction to sell the company into private equity as I was leaving. The CEO had died suddenly, the estate was not well managed, and we had to basically conduct a fire sale of the company to close the estate, to liquidate the most valuable asset in the estate. And so in that last 2 years, 2009, 2010, not only was it the recession, which was very interesting in the restaurant world, but it was also me getting exposure to navigating the wild world of private equity. And I got to meet many firms. And I got exposure to a range of what felt like negative and positive. And so not only was Focus Brands multi-brand, and Cinnabon was one of the brands in that portfolio, but Rourke Capital was among the most respected, most positive private equity firms. And so when I had that opportunity, it was like, yes, even though Cinnabon was in a very bad position when I took it over.
And speaking of opportunity, I think after you were made president, you were on Undercover Boss.
I was.
What was that experience like? Youngest president on Undercover Boss?
Youngest woman, youngest person, first woman. Granted, it was early in that. I don't know how many episodes or how many seasons they've had, like 18 or 20 or something crazy. This was season 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So what led to that is actually my last year at Hooters, I was in the Hooters episode, which was season 1, second episode, first season. But I was just in the boardroom. I was an executive in a few scenes. The CEO, Kobe, at the time was the undercover boss. So I at least had experience with the show. I knew what was happening behind the scenes. I understood how it could play out. That Hooters episode ended up being very controversial, negative in some ways, but it was very positive for the business, actually. And so I had the opportunity to see that even when it's spun as dramatic, it is reality and it is unscripted, but it is also highly edited. And it was edited, of course, for dramatic impact. And so I got to see that even when things are kind of twisted and spun for drama that moves it away from what really happened exactly, that it could still be good for the business. So I actually had a confidence in participating in the show. They then came to me like the minute I joined Cinnabon as president, and they're like, we need women, we need younger folks. Like there's not a lot of you running companies. But in my first year, I said no. And my reason was not that I didn't trust the opportunity of the show. I didn't know my franchisees. I had not earned their respect. I honestly hadn't spent much time in the stores to know what I was even going to uncover as a not undercover boss, as a just regular leader. And that was not the right time. So I said no for the first 18 months. They kept coming back. And eventually it felt right. Eventually I said, you know what? I know enough about my business. I have enough relationship with my franchisees, because you do have to lie to people outright. You have to say you're doing something that you're not. You have to say what's going on is a version of the truth. You can't say it's undercover boss. You're contractually bound to not say a peep, or they can like ruin you legally. It's like awful. But you have to know that you're doing that in service of something very good, which is storytelling. So I had to have enough confidence that I could manage that storytelling to my franchisees while preserving the integrity of my relationship with them, which is we have an opportunity. It's a documentary. It is in a way. And cameras are going to be in stores. Details will be shared with applicable franchisees, but the rest of you aren't going to know anything. And I'm going to kind of be inaccessible for 2 weeks. And then we filmed for 15 days, 15 hours a day for 15 days. And the episode came out. It's still one of the most viewed episodes. It's got new life lately on Instagram. So people are starting to send me pictures that are 13 years ago, me in a very ugly blonde wig. But it was actually beautiful. It was exhausting, but it was great for the business. I think 10 million people watched the first episode, and that was 13 years ago. And it told the story of how sweet our employees were. And I think did a good job of showing the heart of our leadership within the business.
Yeah. I'd love to know, just even during your time at Cinnabon, just some of the business lessons you learned. I know you've spoken about the fact of even just through speaking with customers that they wanted a smaller Cinnabon, for example. And by the way, all that is like kryptonite for me, like Auntie Anne's, Cinnabon. Like I'm in an airport trying to be good and I will walk by and it's, yeah.
I praise myself every time I walk past an Auntie Anne's and don't buy.
Yes.
I'm like, good job, Kat. So at Cinnabon, there were so many lessons. I was president for just under 4 years before I took a kind of a group leadership role within the parent company. And look, the first year was tail end of the recession, awful economics, really dangerously negatively positioned franchisees financially. Many of them were small business owners and had multiple years of top line declines and facing bankruptcy, a lot of obligations to malls, most of them signed personal guarantees. So one lesson was just my mindset when I joined, because I had to recognize that coming in with blind positivity was not going to help an entire group of people that had multiple years of such a negative experience, yet they loved the brand. So they needed someone to come in and be practical and show what was possible, not necessarily be cheerleader positive. It was like, here's what's possible. You do have a beloved brand. You do have a unique product. You do have distribution that has value. Yeah, foot traffic is in a trough, but it comes back, and it did. So they needed someone to come in and acknowledge their pain and show a path to what was possible. And so it was just mindset, leadership, tone, just not reading the room. The second was what you reference, which is just staying close to the action, which is my mantra. Stay close to the action. And the action is the transaction. And so in a business like that, it's go listen to customers, go work at the counter, go ride with the vendors, go talk to franchisees, talk to managers. It means being where the product's being made, bought, sold, and consumed. So I did nothing but hang out at what we called bakeries for about 60 days, my first 60 days. I mean, I hired some people, fired some people, spent some time in the corporate office, but for the most part, I was in the stores. And I had learned in my franchise opening experience at Hooters to ask these 3 questions. Tell me one thing we should stop doing to make the business better. Tell me one thing we should start doing to make the business better. And tell me one thing you would do differently if you were me to make the business better. And that's essentially what I asked everyone I met in that 60 days. But the way I asked it would change based on who I was talking to. So if I was talking to an hourly employee, instead of saying, tell me one thing we should stop doing, I would say, what do we make you do that doesn't make sense? It's the same thing, but asked in a different way. And it's giving them permission. I'm saying that doesn't make sense. I am assuming there is something we are doing that to you is ridiculous. And they would answer. And then I would say, for what's one thing we could start doing? The way I'd ask them that question is, when do you have to say no? Like often. When do you say no? And the theme of the answers to those questions led me to people were asking for smaller portions and they were having to say no. We didn't have any cinnamon. The bakery is famous for cinnamon rolls, literally the size of some people's faces, not even children. It's like adult noggin. And people would ask for smaller portions. We didn't have it, but the franchisees viewed that as our point of pride, our point of differentiation. We're famous for this big, ooey gooey, delicious carb bomb. And so I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting that in multiple cities, different stores, small towns, rural, urban, everybody's kind of telling me the same story, which hints at market trends, not just some exceptional dynamic in a particular location or geography. They would also say, we're starting to see people throw away pieces of the big cinnamon roll. We never used to see that before. People would just like scarf it down or 2 people show up and share it. Another way of saying maybe we should have smaller portions. Then when I would ask, tell me one thing you would do differently if you were me. A general manager would say something like, give me portable products because my customers are now mall employees and customers are now more on the go when they do come into the mall. And the employees would say people are looking for something cheaper. Like it feels so expensive at this time. And the franchisees would say, help me with profitability. Well, those answers are all related. Something smaller, more portable, priced more affordably is going to lead to more trial, more revenue, and more profitability, and actually priced higher per ounce than the bigger thing. But my franchisees were really afraid of trade down. They were like, if you make us sell something smaller, people who are already buying the big thing that's $5 are going to buy the little thing that's $2.50. And so the very people who stood to benefit from such a simple, easy, not complicated innovation, like use the same ingredients and the same pan and the same oven and just roll a skinny log instead of a chunky one and cut it into 15 little cinnamon rolls instead of 6 giant ones. That is literally the innovation. And they threatened to sue me if I made them do that. And that's just fear, right? And so I learned that the people often most incentivized, you would think, to drive a change are also often the most fearful because they're in the middle of the pain and they will resist one of the answers to their improvement. So I then had to lean on existing franchisees to help me. I could have forced it in. I had the contractual right through our franchise agreements to say, you're going to sell this and maybe not at this price, but this is now going to be a national menu item. But I don't want to lead through compliance, right? Once you get to that point, you're in lawyer land. And I want to lead through commitment when at all possible. And so I needed to get them committed to the opportunity and the possibility that this data-driven, insight-driven innovation, not just my random idea, was going to create for them. And the way I did that is I found a franchisee that had actually been serving smaller portions for a long time, but then hiding it when we came in to do our audits. And he was like, I know this makes money, but you guys aren't smart enough to put it on a corporately approved item. And you're also not smart enough to come in and audit without telling us. So when you come to the store, we hide it. And it was so obvious, right? That's like a friend of mine used to call it BLOs, blinding lights of the obvious, and Nadia Bilchik. And it was such a BLO. And it's like, you're doing it and you're making money and the customers are asking for it and the managers are asking for it. They just don't know they're exactly asking for this. And the franchisees think they don't want it, but they do. I need your help in selling this in. And so another lesson, and maybe the final one, is just learning how to lead through influence so that you have more commitment in your system, in your company, than you have to lean on compliance. Because that, that like a letter of the law, the letter of the agreement, when you get there, when that's how you manage, it's a tough place to step back from if you expect to have a long-term relationship, which franchising is a 20-year annuity.
Yeah. So speaking of, everywhere you've been, it seems like you've been there for a long period of time, like just well tenured. And then it was time to move on from Focus Brands. I believe you took a year off before making
what was
the
supposed
move.
to be a year. It ended up being like 4 months, but
The intent.
Yeah.
Right. But this is interesting because it's as far as the product goes. You had multiple brands, multiple franchises, multiple SKUs, selling essentially a sweet, arguably not very healthy product. Yeah. And you went in the complete opposite route, one SKU, very healthy. Like, talk me through that.
Yeah. So in my 10 years at Focus, which is what you're referencing, is a long time, after almost 15 years at Hooters, within that 10 years, I mentioned just under 4 was Cinnabon, but then I became group president and helped bring more of our multi-channel business across brands to the market. And then I became president and COO for the last 4 years of the total parent company, which did have a range of like healthier brands and what at the time we called fun for you brands, which meant the sugary sweet treats. And so in that time, in that 10 years at Focus Brands, I changed a lot. One, I was 31 when I became president of Cinnabon. So from 31 to 41, I met the love of my life. I got married. I had kids at 39 and 41. So I'm running this huge multi-billion-dollar company. Most of my peers have grandkids. And I'm like walking around with a giant stomach that's caused me to push back from the boardroom table. And so I did things a little later, more common now, but for then what felt like a little later, and especially amongst my peers, right? It was very interesting what different life stages we were at. In that time, again, I had multiple miscarriages in between having my kids. My mom got breast cancer, and she's cancer-free now many years. And so through my own life journey, my mom's health journey, I got really serious personally about health and nutrition, somewhere in the middle there. And what I found myself doing was applying that desire to our portfolio at Focus Brands. So Moe's, we had keto and paleo bowls. And Schlotzsky's, we changed some of our salad approach. We acquired Jamba Juice and took it private, and we cut the sugar in half. Like, I did my part. Sometimes one of the best ways to make an impact is to take a big thing and make it better. Other times, another way to make an impact is to take on a smaller, more future-oriented thing and help it grow. So in my last half of my tenure at Focus Brands, I was taking that big thing and making it as healthy and conscious as I could for the brands that we had. And then I realized my work was done there. And I had found myself making a lot of personal early stage seed Series A investments in better for you companies, health and wellness companies. My husband and I became angel investors, like over 60 angel investments. So it was fairly significant. And so when you step back and you go, okay, I've probably brought my personal ethos as much to this focused portfolio as I can without trying to make these brands something they're not. And I'm putting my personal energy increasingly into a different segment of the industry, true health and wellness and better for you. It's time for me to go put all my energy there. So I knew that if I was going to stay in consumer, it was going to be health and wellness. And I decided to take that year off, spend time with my kids, advise, continue to invest. But I had been a customer of AG1, what was then called Athletic Greens, for 2 years. It was kind of my like post-second child foundational nutrition, helped me with my gut, hair, skin, and nails, immunity from all those germs coming in from having 2 little kids. And it made such a difference in my life. I was a chief fangirl of the product, but I didn't know how big the company was. I didn't know much about it. I just knew the product worked for me. And then I got a phone call and that time off from a friend who said, hey, the founder of Athletic Greens heard you on a podcast and wants to meet you. He needs some help. His company's growing. I'm like, oh, I love that. I'm advising right now and I love that company, of course. So I started advising him, and very quickly what started as advisory and my year off turned into just 4 months off, and advisory moving to heavy advisory, moving to him saying, come help me build this. You're passionate about it. You can help us grow. And I learned a few things. One, the company was larger than I thought. It was growing far more quickly than anyone knew. The founder was very private, and he didn't brag. He didn't tell people about the company's revenue or profitability or growth or success, but it was undeniable. And so at first I had this little ego moment where I was like, this is so much of a smaller company. Like, is that really the best use? Everyone expected me to go to bigger brands. But then I realized, actually, this is the perfect company at the perfect time. And what better way to have an impact than to be able to shape the early stage growth? And so I became president and COO of the company in late October, early November of 2021. And we 4x'd the company in 3 years, and I became the CEO over a year ago. And I am still as passionate today, even more so, about this company and about health and wellness and the mission and how we approach foundational nutrition as I was back then.
Let's talk a little bit about it. I mean, just for those listening that don't know what AG1 is, never tried it, how would you describe it? And what are some of the benefits? Who's it for?
Yeah. So AG1 is, I actually have an old travel pack. We have skinny ones now, but this is one
Which was an amazing innovation, by the way.
You're welcome, everyone.
The skinny travel pack.
We got skinny travel packs now. This is one from Germany. I don't know why it's in my pocket. Probably from a speech, because I always like to pull it out. And it's just this one thing, right? It's a green powder that combines a multivitamin, a drinkable multivitamin, pro and prebiotics, and phytonutrients, which is high quality powder like fruits and veg, mushrooms, herbs, in one daily health drink that supports nutrient gaps that even if you eat super healthy, our food is not as nutrient dense as it once was. We also are living lives that demand a higher nutrient load to support. Many of us are deficient in everything from B vitamins to D to others. So it covers nutrient gaps first and foremost, drinkable multivitamin, and supports gut health. It has gut health support. And most of us need both. Some need more one than the other, but it benefits most people and is architected and formulated to be mild enough to drink every day to support still a healthy diet. It is not a meal replacement. So you drink it every day, ideally in the morning to get all the best benefits, but anytime you want. You could drink it at night. If you're not sensitive to choline and B vitamins, you can drink it after your workout. You can put it in a smoothie, but it's designed to be tasty enough to drink just in water, which is part of the IP, the order in which we blend these whole food ingredients. No artificial sweeteners, no juices, no added sugars, and it is tasty enough to drink every day. Most people start to crave it. It's still green, and you can taste the goodness, but it's tasty enough to drink every day, and that helps people build the routine. And we had that for 15 years. Just AG1, one daily health drink to start your morning and to support your nutrients and gut health. And then get these expanded benefits. So most people feel natural energy from it, and they start drinking a little less caffeinated coffee. I love coffee, so I just switched to a little decaf. Then it's no more 2 p.m. slump. And there's a lot of reasons that's happening. It is B vitamins and choline, but it's actually the gut health support. It's your system running more efficiently. The second benefit people get is digestive. Everything from less bloating, better digestion, smoother poop, more regularity. It's magical. Then the third, which takes longer to show up, is immune health support. You just notice yourself getting a little fewer sneezes and all of those things at the time when other people do. And that's because your immunity resides in your gut and it supports gut health. And we have 4 double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled human trials on the formula, not just ingredient research, on the formula, people actually drinking this to prove those benefits, which no other supplement in this space has. So it's more clinically backed, third-party certified. Pro athletes can take it because it's NSF for sport, which third-party validates the label and also assures that hundreds of contaminants and anything that could be construed as a doping agent is not in there. So we are deeply trusted. There's a lot of hype in the supplement category. This is like, we make our job so hard on ourselves by bringing in NSF, by bringing in third parties, by demanding this level of additional clinical rigor because we are so trusted. And it's not that you have to have all these things to be a quality supplement. It's that if you're going to be a premium supplement and a leader in the category, your customers deserve it. So we add these layers of exceptional rigor so that people go, I know what I'm paying for, and I know it's not just marketing, and I know it's not just hype, because there are layers of third-party validation. And we've improved the formula over 50 times in 15 years. Just constant research advances. We evolve and upgrade the ingredients. And we just completed our largest upgrade. We hadn't upgraded it in about 5 years. So we were growing so much. And so we over doubled the some of the B vitamins and made sure they were all methylated for higher absorption. We increased the probiotics, the diversity of the strains, as well as the amount, and made many other changes. We took some things out that the research no longer said were the best way to get some of these phytonutrients, so some grasses, and added in different vegetables. And we'll keep doing that every few years, and hit $600 million in revenue doing that one thing in just one channel. No Amazon, no retail, but now we've stepped into Amazon. Now we went direct to national with Costco with our classic formula, one flavor, the original flavor. And in a few weeks, we're launching multiple flavors of AG1 Next Gen, only available on our site, and AGZ, a sleep product, our first ever second product. So now we can help ground you in your morning and your night rituals, melatonin-free, magnesium L3 innate based.
Yes, yes. So we were talking about it before we started recording because I'm like, I can't wait to get my hands on this stuff.
I've been drinking it for 6 months. It's amazing.
What can you talk about, whether it's AGZ or even aspects of like the product pipeline? Like what can you share? Like what are you excited about?
What I'm excited about, one is it's almost a kamikaze move how much we are commercializing innovation in such a short period of time, right? We upgraded our formula for our entire subscriber base. No subscriber asked us to do that. So it's very risky to take something people have been drinking every day for a decade in some cases and go, hey, we changed it. It required so much work. So I am so excited about the fact that we did that thoughtfully, successfully, and elevated the formula and brought our customers even more scientific proof of the formula's impact. And that took 2 years. It was so hard working on that for 2 years and seeing no benefit. Right? Because nobody knows. Can't talk about it. It's not done. You don't know the outcome. And so I'm incredibly proud of that work. Then 4 weeks later, another 18 months of work came to life by going direct to national in Costco. That never happens. If anyone is listening to this and is into retail or CPG, most of the time, a D2C brand or an upstart brand is going to get like a region of Whole Foods or get a trial with Target. And then you'll go through those incredible retailers, and then maybe you earn your way to the behemoth that is Costco, because they only allow a few SKUs in each category and are very demanding of quality inventory. It's a beast. And we went there as our first move. We make no small plans, as the Summit organization says. And so we did that. And now we're on a journey of being in retail for the first time and understanding what that means. And what it looks like is we're reaching very different people who would have never subscribed online. And now I am most excited about giving people flavors of AG1 because there's 600 million worth of people who love the flavor or have come to feel it is great for their routine. But there's a lot of people who have said, I don't love the flavor, or I don't know that I love it or not, but it looks green and it looks scary, and you're not giving me a lot of other flavor description. I'm not going to try it. There's flavor fear. So having these flavors, tropical, citrus, I'm team citrus, it's unbelievable, berry, tropical citrus and berry in addition to original, is going to open up people who will now begin their mornings in a more healthy way because we've met them where they are. So I'm so excited about it. It seems simple, but it's not for a company that's done one thing one way for 15 years. And then AGZ, it's a big deal, right? Like, sleep is such a problem. It is a bigger problem than people know. And 70% of people know they have some degree of an issue. And there's a lot of variables that go into optimizing sleep. But one of them is the importance of shifting gears to a calm state so that your body can do what it does naturally, which is sleep. It's just hard in the modern world. And there are many tools to do it. Your circadian rhythms through the day and sunlight, not getting blue light, all the things that many people are coming to know. But there are minerals, amino acids, and herbs that can help shift our gear into a calm state. And that's what AGZ is. Magnesium L-threonate, which is the only magnesium with clinical proof to cross the blood-brain barrier. Lots of magnesiums are great. This one has particular efficacy for mood and calm. Ashwagandha, L-theanine, myoinositol, like people will see the label. If you know, you know. You're going to look at this label and be like, damn, that's legit. So I'm excited about the quality of these ingredients and helping people begin a calm wind-down routine. But there's no melatonin. If you like melatonin, you can stack it on for people to have a more restorative sleep. However, beyond that, we will be exploring different form factors. So I won't say which, but you can imagine in your mind something other than powder. That is absolutely on our roadmap. We will be exploring AG1 innovations for different life stages that may be younger or older. And there's more beyond there.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting. So
yeah.
I want to pivot a little bit just to leadership lessons you've learned, just through your experience. I mean, talking about wartime leadership versus peacetime leadership, how do you approach each one?
I'm curious to see what your listeners think, and I'd love to know what you think. I'm finding that the lines are blurring between peacetime and wartime now because things change so much. Like, if you feel peacetime, whatever that even means, growth, not as much competitive disruption, that is literally not going to last very long in any industry. So even if there is a line between what the books call peacetime and wartime leadership, they are either blurred or the era changes so frequently that you can't whiplash your team in how you lead. So I have found over the years, my leadership has evolved to have a more always-on intensity that would be reflective of what used to be called wartime CEO, but is an always-on intensity. Whether it's like, hey, everything's great. I call it type 1 fun. When I joined AG1, it was type 1 fun. So much growth, no competition, roller coaster, hands in the air, whee, like type 1 fun. Then, as the category matures and as we lap our own growth, it's what my husband, who's an ultra-endurance athlete, calls type 2 fun, where it's rewarding, but there's a lot more struggle for the reward. And that, I feel like more things, if you're doing anything worth doing, kind of live in the type 2 fun most of the time, which requires elements of wartime leadership. But also, if wartime leadership and the way it was defined is all you have, then it can get a little tougher to build a sustainable culture. And so I think I bring elements of both together, which is one, being bullish and making investments in the future versus like only cost optimization and narrow focus. But the superpower of narrow focus, which AG1 had to the extreme for a long time, and even our new innovation is still very focused. I mean, we're tripling our product offering, but that's 3 times 1. We're not going crazy. And there's a temptation to sometimes. People want us to make protein and collagen and all kinds of stuff, but we're not going to, not today. We're doing what feels right for our capabilities, our customer, and the needs that we meet. And we'll keep opening ourselves up to test, learn, and iterate, but I will keep that what feels like wartime level of discipline and focus on our efforts.
Yeah. And when you spoke at our summit, you mentioned the hot shot rule. And sometimes as a leader, when you don't know what to do, This is something I know that you've employed.
Yes.
If you could elaborate on it, and maybe when's the last time that you used it to make a change in 24 hours?
Practiced it Sunday, every Sunday. I lose track of how many years, 17, 18, something like that I've been practicing the hot shot rule. And it is the title of a book I'll eventually put out, and it's the title of my TED Talk that's out. So if people really want to know more, they can go look it up for sure. I learned very early on that more and better is always possible, which is a sign of humility. I also learned, in a way I'm so grateful for, to not use that to feel beaten down or small, defeated. I suck. I'm terrible. I'm never good enough. It's not that. It's just that better is always possible. And if better is always possible, and if as a philosophy I want to continue to grow in my life, that's what I want. Maybe it's not what everybody wants, but I think most people want to improve as they move through the world, whatever that means to them, their fitness, how they show up as a dad, a husband, a leader, a daughter. We want to be as good or better, most people. And so then if you ask, well, what's required for that? Well, better by definition is different. And so if different is required, what is one thing? I'm a big fan of one thing exercises because it's execution oriented versus thinking. What is one thing I could do differently to be better tomorrow? Which is a lot like the questions I asked my employees at Cinnabon. What's one thing we could do differently? So when I ask that, I can ask you that. I can ask a mentor. I can ask an advisor. But the reality is, much more at my fingertips is the ability to envision what else I could do without needing to employ the counsel of someone else. Now, I like doing both, of course. And the hot shot rule is simply a self-coaching act of giving myself a minute, a scheduled minute, and takes me much longer to explain than to practice it, of grounding myself in the job I want to get better at. Job as mom, job as wife. And I do use the hot shot rule for my personal life occasionally, but mostly it's for my professional role. And so I think about my work. I think about AG1. I think about my company, my team, my responsibilities, and my challenges. That's step one. The second step is I envision someone I admire. Could be anyone. So I'm going to envision you, everything you've built here at Crisp, like all that you have and what I've gotten to know about you. So I think about you. And then I ask myself, I envision you taking over my job. I'm just gone. It's like the ghost of holiday past. I'm watching and you're in the seat and I'm just around. What's one thing you do immediately? What is the one thing that when you look at my Slack or you get an overview of the business, you're like, man, love Kat, but I cannot believe she let this happen. Not on my watch, right? Because you have that day one energy. It's the thing you pick up on and you make a difference in right away. For whatever reason, grounding myself in my role that I know, but looking at it through the eyes of someone I admire, even just philosophically, as an imaginative exercise, one thing comes to mind. There is one thing that you would do differently, for sure, if you took over AG1 tomorrow. And whatever that one thing is, I take action on it in 24 hours. So this last Sunday, I envisioned actually a customer that I had talked to who was super inspiring. So I practiced the hot shot rule every Sunday, and I envisioned my role. And she was 66 years old. She's a rowing champion in her age group, like gym rower, not even like on a water row. She's just like a beast rowing in a gym and competing. And she's been drinking AG1 for a decade. And she told me all these stories over the decade of how she tried other things and then they didn't make as much of a difference. And so she came back. And as we're launching these innovations, I was reminded that sometimes we can get caught up in the new and lose the reminder, the energetic focus in the company on being obsessed with the customer's experience. Do they know what we're doing? Are we saying it enough? Are we getting it to them in ways they're going to hear and read and see? Not everybody opens emails and texts. Like we can talk to ourselves, go, we sent the email. Who cares if nobody read it? And so in 24 hours, every meeting I was in the week that followed, I was just far more intense and obsessive about the customer insights, forcing meetings, stopping doing things. I mean, it literally changed activities in the company. Sometimes what comes out of it is I call someone and say, I'm sorry, I could have handled that better. What I envision is the person who takes my role would have handled something differently, and I need to acknowledge it. It's led to me firing people. It's led to me getting on a plane and going to have a very serious conversation. It's led to me terminating contracts. It's led to me making an extra phone call that resulted in millions of dollars of business, right? It's just one thing that you do differently, because the reality is you kind of know the 10 things you could and should be doing, but other things are taking precedent. So if you just give yourself the discipline and the expectation to do one of those things each week, I get that a year's worth of weeks things done that maybe I would have never done, or I would have not done it. So it makes me an absolute beast in leadership and in business. The last step of the hot shot rule actually is you tell people. You say, you don't have to say I practice the hot shot rule. You can just say, on Monday morning, I practiced on Sunday, so I put it in motion Monday. I say, I was thinking, if you were in my seat, you would not allow this to happen. You would change this, even if it means I'm undoing something I did. So I'm demonstrating humility, a bias for action, and we're moving on, right? I'm acknowledging there's things I could have and should have done last week or last year that I didn't. I am now. We're doing it. So it creates this culture of people, one, being really comfortable calling me out, actually, because they see I call myself out every week. Like, that's something I should have done. So people are much more comfortable saying, why aren't we doing this regularly? It also shows humility and vulnerability and that growth mindset, and gives me more permission to instill that and insist in it from others.
And Kat, I've actually, since you shared this at our summit, I've started practicing it. I've also found that in our experience, it's like easy to give somebody else advice, right? Because you can see their situation objectively. So if you take yourself out of your own, out of your own head and say, if I were giving Michael advice about this scenario, or if I were, just someone that I admire. And what's fascinating to me is that a lot of the things that I've been putting off, I know that person would do immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And they'd probably go much bigger with it.
Yeah. And you got to be gentle on yourself a bit. You're human. You know why? There's something else that feels more important. And for me, the early years of practicing this, what I recognized is that when I would go tell people, hey, here's what I should have done this and I didn't, and now I have, they would have the same reaction to me that I had to my mom when she left, which is, finally, what took you so long? Because the people who are close to the action, it is a big deal to them. But if you're a leader and if you've been in your business for a while or your marriage for a while, the things that used to be big issues, you probably took care of. And now you have new challenges today, but they don't feel as big to you because you've navigated the messy stuff. And now the stuff seems little by compare, but it's today's big deal. And so when you air it, it's also kind of affirming, where it's like the people are waiting for you to make the call. I was waiting for my mom to make the call, and I have zero judgment that she didn't make it sooner. She had to do what she had to do, but then she did. And so I feel that empowerment as a leader, that there are reasons I don't do something in the past. I'm going to learn from it. I'm not going to wallow in it, but I'm going to acknowledge if I could have and should have done something differently and do something about it. But I'm not going to make myself feel terrible because it's one of 100 things I've yet to do. It's just the next one thing I need to do.
And I'm curious, because I'm sure as a lot of people are who are listening to this podcast, they're CEOs, they're founders. What's been your approach to, I don't even love this word. I wouldn't say balance, but perhaps integrate.
Yeah, harmony.
Family, blend. And just personal needs, et cetera, while also, being the CEO of a global brand and having those accountabilities. Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah. One, for myself, I try to focus on my energy management. And paying attention over the years through various methods, feedback from my husband, my own tuning in and awareness of what gives me energy and what drains my energy, and doing my best to bend the arc of my time to things that give me energy on a net basis. I have to do some things I don't love. But on the whole, if I am able to bias my time toward the things that give me energy, I am better for everyone, including myself. The next is, I believe so much in this theme of checking in. The hotshot rule is kind of checking in. It's checking in with the advice of others without needing to go ask them. But my husband and I have a monthly check-in, and we have been doing it since the month we met, October 10th, 2015. It's tattooed on our arms. And every month we ask each other 6 questions, and it is, what's been the best part of the last 30 days? What has been the worst part of the last 30 days as it relates to how we show up for each other, which could be work sometimes, but could be immediately our relationship. The third question, what is one thing I can do differently to be a better partner for you? Very interesting question, right? And sometimes you get a little lazy and you're like, everything's great, or I don't know, there's so much you can do better. But so we'll say, okay, give me one thing to stop, one thing to start, and or one thing to continue. And it kind of forces some actionable specificity. The fourth question is, what has worried you or weighed on you the most in the last 30 days? Fifth question is, what are you most grateful for? And the sixth is, what are you most proud of as it relates to how we show up? And what's beautiful about this is, one, it's a saved place for literally this conversation. It doesn't mean you don't address both being grateful in a moment, real time, or addressing a problem, real time. But it is a space where there is more acceptance and receptiveness to these types of reflections of just, again, one thing, right? It's all one thing. I don't need a list because we're going to talk about it every month. And some rhythm of checking in with people who are most important to you. And I do a version of this with my team, not all 6 questions all the time, but sometimes a consolidated version. You're checking in to know where people are and to get feedback of where you are. And that gives you a bit of the knowledge and the outside in view so you can make more of those energetic, like what's most important to me and my values decisions. So I ground in my values. I focus on energy. I have regular check-ins to make sure that what is shaping my decisions of how I use my time, which is a lot of the balance question, to make sure it is reflective of, is this serving what I say is important to me, my values? And if my family, if my health, number 1, my family, number 2, they are in fact in that order. Out of the family, my husband and I first, our kids second. People freak when I say that. I'm like, and then I've had someone ask, are you saying if you were in a boat and there's 4 of you, I have 2 kids, and you only had 3 life vests that you give it to your husband and not your kids? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But that order is like, if one exists, if my health exists and is strong, I can be better for all the things that follow. If my relationship with my husband is strong, we're better for the kids and we're right. It's just like I'm honest about how that pyramid is structured. But it doesn't mean my kids get the last life preserver. That is how, right? And then constantly being willing to change. And some weeks I'm so intense at work and I'm traveling a ton, but I have boundaries. Like I do my best to never travel more than 5 days. Exit to reentry more than 5 days. And if I do have that it is only every other month. Just for me, I want to be around my kids more. They're fine. We moved my husband's parents to live next door to us. We got multi-generation squad happening. It's selfish. It's from my energy. I want to be around them. I feel sad when I'm gone more. And then my husband and I have a rule that we will never, ever, ever be without each other for more than 10 days. Physically. So if we're traveling, we will literally fly to cross in an airport in the rare, and now that's rare, with the exception of he is circumnavigating the globe on only human power and he rows across oceans and that requires him to be gone for 45 days or 60 days or 80. That only happens every few years when he goes and crosses another part of the planet. But our regular operating rhythm, which sounds a lot like a CEO structure and rhythm of operating a company, how we operate our families with these commitments that reflect our values. And then if we ever make exceptions, we make sure they remain exceptions and that we take the time to pour back into each other and reinvest in that core so that it's incredibly strong for whatever else the world decides to bring.
Yeah. Amazing. We have like company core values and then we have family core values. We started doing that. And then we do like a weekly reviews, just like we do like our executive leadership meetings where we're reviewing things. We have a weekly family meeting.
So cool.
And at first it sounded ridiculous to me, like the thought of this.
It feels like a lot to some people.
But it works so well in the business that the idea of having some clarity and alignment and so on personally probably makes more sense there than it does even in the business at times. Kat, as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
Being a game changer to me means courage. I believe that the most successful people in the world embody 4 mindsets more than others: humility, curiosity, courage, and confidence. And the one I see lacking the most in order to change the game is courage.
I want to give a huge thank you to Kat for taking the time to join us on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691, and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Kat Cole, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.